really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Hey, motherfucker, what you like to do?
Oh, I don't know. Play chess. Screw.
Well, let's play chess.
They give off to Jonathan Taylor. Jump cutting his way close to the goal line. He's in there. Touchdown. I-N-D-Y. Jonathan Taylor.
Wheeler finds Quan from the logo.
Here's Halliburton into the front court. Mishandled it, but gets a shot. Hits it. Hits it.
John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, welcome in on a Tuesday. Tomorrow's going to be great. It's our tradition to be at Brothers in Broad Ripple tomorrow, and we are going to have a group, we're going to have a crowd, and we will look for you tomorrow beginning at 3. And I know that, tomorrow afternoon, you got a little IU hoopage that's working too. What time does that start? Noon, I believe, coming up tomorrow. Did I get that right? So, yeah, we'll watch a little bit of hoop, and I'm sure have a fantastic time on a Bud Light Blue Wednesday coming up tomorrow at Brothers in Broad Ripple. How did we think about the Pacers? Tony Easter's going to join us coming up at the 5 o'clock hour. And I know we'll get to the Colts, and obviously pretty big week for them. There's no doubt about that. Coming up on Sunday against New England, banged up even more than they were prior. Got a lot to get to, including Nate Atkins of the Star coming up a little bit later on. But I bring up Tony first is because for the first time I went on his podcast today. So he and I were talking back and forth, and I'll let you know when that thing officially gets released because we had some really good conversation about this Pacer team, who they are, where they've been, and the expectations of this team compared to what you thought at the beginning of the season. Now, granted, you look back at the last two, they get a couple of wins. Absolutely necessary. You have to. This, in fact, has started for the Pacers a run, a group of games that you really need to catch fire. You got to catch some fire here. And, of course, I'm talking about winning, but I'm also talking about becoming, if you can, and I know they still have injuries and are without guys, but there are enough dudes out there to show more than what they've been showing. To not look like you get against Toronto. To not look like you did in that Friday night against Miami. To not look like you did against Charlotte a couple of weeks back. They played down to their competition at times a year ago, but this has been different. When they played down to their competition, normally it was still with Tyrese Halliburton being Tyrese Halliburton. Now, the last two, and really the second half, if you want to put it that way, the second half of the Bucks game, even in a loss, things are better. Things look better. Now, that also is a product of who you're playing against. Washington's awful. Last night, hell, you needed to go. You had to have some kind of roster to look and see who the hell that New Orleans was playing. Not a lot of recognizable dudes. But you still have to take care of that, and they did. But we're basically talking about a 10-game stretch to where I want to see this team, and that's what Tony had asked me. We'll discuss coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. I want to see this team slowly transform and get back to the level of expectations we have because I got a lot hanging out there. And I know I'm thinking about it selfishly. I'm thinking about it in terms of me. But let's go ahead and think about me for a moment. I have been in love with these moves. I have touted these moves as savvy, as smart, relatively unique in terms of the NBA. Not feeling as if you got to go out and bring guys in to go with what you had. And so much of that makeup has been through savvy deals, some drafting, trades. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to work. Yeah, I know. It is like running it back. And believe me, that phrase has been utilized as so stinking dirty around here. I do understand it. The running it back phrase has been used so many times with the Colts. I know that it makes most of you nauseous. And it should. That's why I wanted to see this team break out of that. But frankly, they've given us, for the most part so far, plenty of reasons to suspect that, once again, this is not going to work. Again, granted, they've been without guys. They were injured so far this year, unlike that they were injured a year ago. In fact, they were injured this year so far, like the other teams that they played in the postseason were last year. And the good fortune hasn't been there with the injuries. But they've still had enough, their core, their nucleus, where they should have played better, consistently played better, and not subjected us to some of awful basketball we've witnessed in a while with the Pacers, which is unfortunate. Just a number of times, some of those games I mentioned previously, and then just feeling disappointed. Now, granted, all that matters is winning games, getting back on track. These 10 games, this 4-game homestand, which continues with game 3 of it coming up tomorrow night against Portland. These are the ones you have to sustain. Can you imagine how bad? And I thought there were a number of times last night, Pacers get up 15 in the first half, then go down 1. And I mean like that. Second half, Pacers get up 17, go down 1. Like that. And that's one thing that they can't lose themselves a lead. I just, like last night, for example, was I satisfied they won? Yeah. Was I satisfied that Halliburton had a really good game? Absolutely. Because he is the one that absolutely has to get on track and has to be what the expectations are. Because we know how he has been questioned to this point. And you heard in the walk-off interview with Jeremiah Johnson last night, he basically recognized the fact that so much is on him, and that is true. So much is on him. And that fact is not going to go away anytime soon. That's what happens when you're so-called elite, max-out type of deal. You get paid that amount of money. Everything falls on your shoulders. And you're supposed to be able to get them through that. And there have been moments so far where obviously he has been MIA. Last night was a good night for him. Washington was a good night for him. And here's to hoping that continues. Just the level of play. I don't know about anybody else out there. I want to see them, and I wanted it last night. I thought there were a couple of moments last night. I mentioned up 15, up 17, where you just blow their doors off. What are you doing jacking around with these guys? Put them to bed. Sing them a lullaby and say goodnight. They just haven't been able to do it. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for tomorrow night. That's what I'm going to look for coming up on Friday against Detroit. I want to see them put a team away and put the hammer down. Remember a year ago? This is when the fact was we were kind of all falling in love with the Pacers. Remember the product? Fun, up and down the floor, fast pace, high scoring. Couldn't guard you, still can't. But just fun basketball, enjoyable basketball, and winning basketball. And for the most part, that has not been here. It is not maybe a complete 180, but it's been pretty damn close considering what we were thinking about them. I mean, hell, somewhere in the mix coming up, it's coming upon the, 1-year anniversary? One of my favorite games in recent memory was that Monday night in that in-season tournament, the NBA Cup against Boston. Well, they end up beating the Celtics by 10. And it was fun as hell. It was exciting. That was like when the field house, they got up from a long nap for the first time ever in that game, I felt. Like they had been asleep for how long? I mean, hell, the field house probably had been asleep since "This Is My City" was uttered in there. That was that first game when you remember, yeah, that's what it's been like in the past, and that's what you want it to be again. That's when you started to believe it. I know it's easier said than done, but I would love to see them get back to those moments. And that starts with Tyrese Halliburton, as he admitted last night in that walk-off interview with JJ. That's where it's going to start. And when it starts with him, then everybody else is going to get involved. Everybody else is going to be a part of the action. That part is 100% true. Got a win last night, and you want to make sure, again, basically going up to the middle of December, that you start playing to the level in which I think everybody expected, including the Pacers organization. Tony East will join us. We'll talk about that and then some. Yeah, last night there were some fantastic moments, fun moments, and then there were some moments where you go, yeah. More consistency. I just want to see them beat the absolute crap out of somebody. Are they capable of doing it? Crap beating out of somebody? That's what I want to see. I want to see a good old-fashioned ass whipping. And not theirs. Somebody else's. So that's what I'm waiting on. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow night against Portland. That's the offer sheet game. And then coming up, on Friday night against the Toilet. And you'll take it from there. Tony East going to join us coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. The college football projection show. Let me tell you this. And I know that we're living in a world of a lot of love right now because the Hoosiers are still firmly entrenched right there, a major part of the conversation. And even if it's half-assed, they shouldn't be in conversation coming from the South and all the hillbillies and the rednecks and the SEC lovers, even with what transpired on Saturday. I mean, hell, it's both ends. I get it. But you got to admit, we were all right about something. Got to admit, I think we've been all right about many things here recently. I'll get to the Colts stuff we've been right about coming up in a minute. But we were all right about this whole 12-team playoff. It has been outstanding. I know that you're going to tell me that we'll be talking about it regardless of the number. But this has been an awesome conversation. This is exactly what is needed. IU is needed because there is such a divide in those that believe they should be a part of it and those believe they should not. My full expectation is they're still going to be a part of it. And then, let's just face it, Purdue fans know this as much as anybody else does. Then you're looking for IU to come out, and IU fans are looking for them to hang a big number on the Boilers. And you know what's funny about it? Deeply rooted, deep down inside, Boilermaker fans probably want that too. Because evidently there's not enough of a reason to end the Ryan Walters era after the first 2 years of just dismal football. So I think the last-ditch effort for those Purdue fans believing that a change has to come regardless. You guys read our good friend Tom Dienhart again last week told us and then reiterated, I think, yesterday in Gold and Black Illustrated that, what do they call it, the vibe or the trend? It is trending that Ryan Walters comes back for one more season. And let's just face it, I don't feel as if, and I know I'm not the pulse of what's going on in West Lafayette, but as they say, ain't nobody want that. There's nobody wanting that. So I would have to think that Purdue fans go, yeah, you know what, go ahead and hang a big number. What the hell? This is a disastrous season anyway. And see, I think that brings up a really good question for Boilermaker fans out there. Is this a quandary? Can you look up, can you define for me, James, quandary? Because that's a big-ass word that they ain't teaching me down in Greene County. Quandary.
Quandary, a state of perplexity or uncertainty over what to do in a difficult situation.
You're going to have to define perplexity, too. Hell, I can't even pronounce it.
It's also a difficult situation or a practical dilemma.
All right, we've got a practical dilemma here. If you're a Boilermaker fan, would you rather see them in the bucket game just absolutely derail the IU football season? That would be the biggest kick in the groin in the history of groin kicks right there. Let's just face it. Would you rather see that as a Boilermaker fan? Or more ammunition to make what is obvious? The necessity here is to make a coaching change. Well, you can't do that every 2 years. Well, I got news for you. This is the world in which we live right now. This is sports. They do. It's not 1975. I was 5 years old. It was great. I'm playing with toys, right? It's fun as hell in 1975. 1985 was fun too, right? You can get longer than a couple of years. And the worst coaches of all time have had longer than a couple of years. Yeah, not everybody is about, being the general manager of the Colts, for goodness sake. But this particular year, the writing should be on the wall as far as what needs to be done here. So if you're a Boilermaker football fan or just a Boilermaker fan in general, what would you rather see here? You'd rather see them go down there and just ruin everything. It'd ruin everything. That is the ultimate turd in the punch bowl of the IU party right there. Because everybody's leaving. Or, as I mentioned earlier, have IU football hang a huge number on Purdue, and then I'd hate to suggest you'd have to make that more logical. It seems to be about as logical as you get right now to make that change. Would you like the Boilermakers to be the man, look at the man in the mirror and then make that change? Like lose big and then go out and find somebody else? If I was a question of the day type of guy, I think that would be a legitimate question of the day. The college football projections, and again, the expectation is tonight that IU still firmly going to be a part of it. Yeah, I know that there's some flies in the ointment in the works, and when you leave it to people, or what I say about committees, right? Oh, there's only one. There's only one legitimate one. But when you leave it up to others and you just don't, if you don't make it academic, if it is just not etched in stone, leave yourself a little wiggle room of doubt. What would you rather have there, Boilermaker fans, just out of curiosity? I would assume that if there's a rough landing after the bucket game and there's a big-time number that would be hung over the Boilermakers, I don't know how trending in the direction to stay. That's a tough one right there, because I don't know who you're going to bring in the stadium next year. Who's going to buy that? You know what I mean? So we shall discuss that over the course of the afternoon. Actually, Greg Rakestraw is going to join us coming up at the bottom of the hour. I know we have the high school football finals coming up Friday and Saturday. And really tonight, I think, ushers in, does it not, for the most part, the start of the boys' basketball season. Games across the state of Indiana. I got to go to Roncalli and watch CG and Roncalli play girls' basketball. So good friends at Roncalli coming up later on tonight, at least for a minute. Yeah, I know I brought my clothes, just in case I can make it over there for 9 p.m. hoopage. Take the clothes everywhere. I take the clothes and energy drinks, just in case I got to have a wake-up call at 9 o'clock tonight. In no way I'm passing any test anywhere. There's no way they would allow me to play professionally. They go, hey, wait a minute. Not only are you incredibly unathletic, but you've got so much stuff in your body right now, we can't clear you for anything. The Human Torch. But no, busy night for boys basketball around the state of Indiana. And, of course, coming up on Friday and Saturday, the football state finals. And a great deal of intrigue, certainly in the 6A. Conference foes going at one another coming up on Friday. Greg Rakestraw with that, and a lot of college activity coming at you with Greg. It's at the bottom of the hour, too, and the projections, the predictions. But no, I do want to double back to the point I was going to make before I got widely off track here, was the 12-team situation it's been perfect. Nobody's crying for any more now, are they? Will anybody be crying for any more? I mean, you're like justified with the 12 now. It's like, and maybe somebody will be crying. Maybe it's IU that's going to be crying. But it seems like everybody feels justified to this point. And we would have intrigue anyway, but you have to understand the depth of the intrigue. And I know, again, you've got a local storyline going. And I didn't mention Notre Dame. I guess I should. 2 local storylines going. Kevin Bowen to get all pissy. What's Bowen root for in the case of IU Notre Dame? Do we know he went to IU, and and I think he's admitted this before, he's like classic reversible jacket guy. What do they call it? Like double jersey or double hoodie or whatever the hell that stuff is. Now, he's like classic. Although, I will give credit where credit is due was Kev. I've never known another Notre Dame Fighting Irish basketball fan in my life. He's the first one. So I'll give him credit there. But yeah, this has been, the 12-team format has been awesome for conversation. Now, granted, when you've got a little interest around here, certainly not just a little, but a lot of interest, it makes it even more so. Discussion, Greg, bottom of the hour. Nate Atkins had mentioned this. So, yeah, what about the accountability for everybody else? Everybody else on this team. You had it for the 22-year-old quarterback, and this is Nate and not me. And listen, I understand what took place there. There was a level of accountability as to his benching and his grounding, and it did have to do with leadership and doing what you need to do and not showing up on time and taking notes and all that. But it had even more to do with the convenience of, we think right now that Joe Flacco, the 39-year-old, gives us a better chance to win. That was more of the philosophy than it was, this guy needs to be a better leader. But Nate asked the question about everybody else with the offensive line. Like Quentin Nelson has a bad game at left guard. The problem is that's where you're different at quarterback than everybody else is. And basically, if you're born a quarterback, you understand that at birth. Like you exit the birth canal and you go, hey, you know what? Everything's going to be your ass's fault. Or if things go well, everything's going to be the reason why you did it right. That's just the makeup of that position, the importance of that position. But Nate has a couple of interesting points we'll talk about coming up here at the top of the hour. All right, 239-1070 if you so desire. Hopefully I set the table for you good enough where you can call and we can talk, and a lot of things to get to as well over the course of the afternoon. I do love it when there's a great deal of college basketball going on. And, yeah, noon tomorrow for IU and Louisville. The battle for Atlantis. And remember, Don Fisher is staying here to do football on Saturday. So what's the other dude's name that's doing it? I forget his name. Is his name Brent or Brett or something? And it is one of these days that's going to be the case. I don't know about anybody else. When I hear anybody but Don like do IU sports, it's weird. It's really weird. And granted, that's just how I've been wired since, what? A 4-year-old? I mean, everybody else probably feels the same way. Yeah, I know you guys are asking me about the possible semifinal round matchup with the number 3 Gonzaga and IU. Gonzaga is legit. They're just not, much like last year, Mark Few's a really good coach, and they still have good players. They just haven't had the type of incredible players, if that makes sense to you, as they've had in the past. But still good, no doubt about that. Potential semifinal round matchup right there, the battle for Atlantis. My update for you on the Zags. Pacers a winner last night, 114-110. I've got to see some ass whippage. That was a win, and that is good, but that needed to be doors being blown off of a team. Can you believe that Elfrid Payton had 21 dimes last night? In what universe are we living? He almost had a triple-double with 21 assists. What? He was playing with the Mad Ants here recently. Last year, I guess. I like Tony Donahue, our good friend, saw him like over here near the Alexander. 21 assists. Tyrese Halliburton, 34-13, and that is certainly more like it, but I think we all are in need to see over the next two a Pacer blowout, if they're capable of doing it. All right, quick break. We'll come back. Greg Rakestraw, bottom of the hour. Nate Atkins to the Star after 4. Tony East, who I have done a podcast, and you will thoroughly enjoy that. Tony's going to join us in the 5 o'clock hour. We're going to be in Broad Ripple tomorrow. Brothers in Broad Ripple, this is a traditional affair, much like you and the family get together for Thanksgiving. The night before Thanksgiving, we get together at Brothers in Broad Ripple and throw a party on a Bud Light Blue Wednesday and give away Colts tickets, too. So I'd love to see everybody up there. I know everybody's talking about the inbound weather. It looks like, at least around here, it's going to be more like rain, right? But we're going to have Lindsay Monroe out there so she can tell us all about the weather forecast. The AccuWeather forecast will be there, but it looks more like rain here. I think we're all going to be good. I think if you're going up to the armpit, then you're going to get some snow. But it'll be like yellow snow in the armpit. But around here, it should be good to go. Tomorrow, Broad Ripple, Brothers, Bud Light Blue Wednesday. Love to see you. The stream, the app, HD Radio, inside the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. Become a AAA member today because it's that time of year and you are going to need them. Always having your back. Now's a great time to do it as well. Matt has told me that you can put the wheels in motion with great deals right now with AAA. Become a member today. The AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live at 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Now you listen here. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. Now go away.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
I'm John. Thank you for joining us. James over there. Tuesday tomorrow, the legendary Wednesday that we have at Brothers and Broad Ripple tomorrow. It's a Bud Light Blue Wednesday. Bridgman writes this, so no, we need to just take the L and move on. The Hoosiers are going to stomp a mud hole in us anyway. We just need to suck it up, take the whipping like the big fellas we are. I asked this question. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't move Purdue any further into taking action after 2 years on their head coach, but it would seem like a large number being hung on that program coming up on Saturday could be a tipping point. Would you rather see that or an upset opportunity for your Boilermaker football program, even if that is so outrageously thought about, never going to happen, ridiculous? I'm asking you to contemplate that for a moment. That and more on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline with Greg Rakestraw, who joins us right now. So if we were going to ask Boilermaker fans of football this, would they rather see Purdue hang in and give IU a bit of a scare or get blown out and then give more of a possibility after 2 years they make a coaching change?
I would get the feeling that it might be kind of split 50-50. I don't think anybody wants to see your biggest rival embarrass you, which is certainly possible coming up on Saturday night. But I'm not sure people are willing to take that to be able to potentially get a new head coach. So that's the ultimate, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I'm not. I know James had to explain quandary to you.
He did.
That might be a bit of a paradox there, John.
Yeah. Hey, stop using these big Lanesville words on me, would you? Come on.
Well, you know how popular me using those words were in Harrison County, so you get that.
So Greg Rakestraw, the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, too. The 12-teamer, I think, has been glorious. Is that just because we've got a great deal of local flavor, or has the whole soap opera of this stuff been as good as advertised, as good as we thought?
No, it's been great. I mean, you have every conference involved. You've got every portion of the country involved. And you've even got the quote-unquote little guys, the group of 5 schools that know they at least get the seat at the table. I mean, when the argument was, hey, we don't want to be like the National Football League, or you got to keep the regular season special, I kept thinking, we kind of break this down literally 68 ways on a Sunday because of who the 7th seed is going to be in the AFC or the NFC. Why wouldn't that hold true in college football? So, yes, it's great for us locally that we can be a part of it, but I'm pretty sure ESPN isn't programming just for those watching in Indiana. Pretty sure they're programming for this nationwide, where seemingly every region of the country has an interest in how this is playing out.
So, Greg Rakestraw, who joins us, what will we see regarding IU, you think, in this projection coming up later on tonight?
I think probably around 9 or 10. I do think the Ohio State loss has probably cost them a home game in the opening round. But again, if those that had been in the rankings behind them had all won, maybe we're having a different outlook and a different conversation about this. But Indiana, they didn't help themselves. But after 3:30, man, they got a truckload of help. Everybody they needed to lose lost. And so I think they will be a CFP team. My best guess would be they're going to be on the road in the opening round.
I said this yesterday, too, and a lot of people said, well, on Saturday, it's just good old IU football on the road in Columbus. But I thought that it wasn't good old IU football in terms of the good fortune that they got, because if it was good old IU football, then everything would have gone the way of the SEC, and we'd be having a different tune sung right now. And they got a great deal of good fortune for a team that really needed a strong outcome or finish in Columbus, win or lose, and didn't come up with it. But basically the rest of the college football world did shine upon them, I thought, positively on the rest of the Saturday this past week.
And I would say the flip side of that, too, is good old IU football would have been like 52-3 in Columbus. Let's make no mistake about it, that game wasn't that close. Indiana did not look, up to snuff. But that's against the number 1 or 2 team in the nation. We're talking about Indiana being a top 10 team. And so, yes, Indiana got some good fortune. But I also think that perhaps it is now time to redefine what, good old Indiana football is, because the bar is a whole lot higher than it used to be.
Is there anything that could happen, I guess, outside of just the changing of opinions that could put this a change in opinions and then obviously not looking good on Saturday night in Bloomington that could put IU's situation in peril in the 12-teamer?
I don't think so. Just because, the SEC has cannibalized itself enough, or I kind of think Indiana's safe, and the ACC's not good enough, where I don't think SMU or Miami, are going to kind of do that much damage, so to speak, to IU's tournament hopes. I don't think, and I'll rip the scab off a wound for you, I don't think this is Indiana State watching all of these teams get upset in conference tournament week and go, hell, there goes our bid. I kind of think Indiana's past that, to be honest with you, because again, they're gonna smoke Purdue. There is just such a wide gap between those two teams, and now not playing in the college football, not playing in the Big Ten championship game, Indiana's resume is done, and I think it's good enough where they're going to be in the college football playoff December 21st or 22nd.
Hey, Greg, should Purdue be making a change regardless of what takes place, I guess, losing-wise on Saturday night? Should there be a change coming after 2 years anyway?
I think so. And again, it's you said it well. It's a different day and age in college football. And I understand there might be some budgetary issues behind that. But I would also say the budgetary issues, if you bring back Ryan Walters, might be equal because people may turn in their tickets. And that's not to bash on Ryan, but it's just the truth of the matter. Again, in this setup, when you can flip the roster so quickly and it goes backwards, this was a significant step backwards from last year at Purdue when they were not a postseason team, not a bowl team. You have the ability to kind of flip the script, bring somebody else in, and start anew, get a new roster. Gone are the days of 3 or 4 years to build a program. If you can't get it done in 2 years, you should be moving on. And so, yes, I think it's time to make that move. But from the sounds of it, I'm not sure that the folks in West Lafayette would agree with that.
And to add to that as well, you can't be this stinking far off of it either. I mean, it's right. Not like that they're even in the neighborhood of respectability for that matter right now. So I think that makes it even more clear.
I mean, there obviously have been some competitive games in the Big Ten, not a lot. But the other factor we haven't touched on yet, and again, there is one program when you're Purdue that you truly measure yourself by, and that's Indiana. And let's face it, for the better part of the last 25, 30 years, Purdue has been the better team, and it's not been close. Now, are there years where IU has won? Absolutely. But when your biggest rival has vaulted so far forward and you seemingly has jumped as far back as Purdue has at that time, to me, that's even more of a reason to make a change.
He's Greg Rakestraw on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I know you're just a little bit north of Louisville, but give us a thumbnail sketch of the Louisville Cardinals, because that is that noon matchup in the Bahamas coming up tomorrow against IU. By the way, 93 WIBC, I believe, has that coverage coming up tomorrow. But what are you thinking?
I would be much more able to give you a breakdown of the U of L IU matchup, say circa 1985 through 1994,
sure,
than I am these days. Like, I am only vaguely familiar with what is going on these days at the University of Louisville, other than Pat Kelsey is the man in charge. And they play at the Yum Center. That's about my now, and they're in the ACC. I'm going deep into the memory bank here, John.
Is Pat Kelsey like volcanic nuts in at least the neighborhood of Danny Hurley? Obviously without the success of the past 2 years, but is he kind of nutty like Hurley is, maybe in the same form?
I'm not sure that's like most college coaches or even some high school coaches at this point in time. And I would love to see more reaction from officials like what happened at the game yesterday in Maui. We have these points of emphasis how about we make a point of emphasis? You can argue with the call. You can have a conversation about a call. If you look and act like a complete jackass, you get teed up. I would love to see that trend really spring forward from here in college basketball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he got teed up yesterday, and nobody thought it was going to happen. So
let's see more of it. I'm all for it. Let's go.
And, yeah, Greg Rakestraw is kind enough to join us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So Kevin Wright's going to be the next head coach at Carmel, correct?
Correct, and you know there are a good amount of openings this year, and obviously Warren is open, Noblesville is open, and Kevin has been at all three of those places. But in talking to a friend of mine on this, he said a couple days ago, he said Kevin's going to take the Carmel job, and that's a great fit for him. I'm going to be up at Carmel for high school basketball coming up tonight. But I had told people this the last couple of weeks. I'm like, listen, I think the coaching market from a high school standpoint starts with, okay, Kevin, you pick where you want to go. Which of these jobs do you think is the right fit for you? Because I think really for Kevin, it was, are you going to, I'm using the air quotes here, John, settle for being a phenomenal high school coach, or do you want to kind of keep chasing, IMG, college coaching, et cetera? And maybe Kevin's at a place in his life now. He's like, you know what? Being a state championship winning high school head coach, even having my own legacy with my father being the all-time wins leader, a record that I don't think will ever be challenged in the state of Indiana. If Kevin's at a good place with that, then Carmel got exceedingly lucky that Kevin is going to come run their program. So good for Kevin and good for the Greyhounds.
Friday and Saturday, state finals. We start with Westfield and Brownsburg. And tell me the games that you are doing and what interests you the most out of those 2 days in championship games.
So that is the game that I have on Friday night. The Saturday game I have is the 5A game between Warsaw and Decatur Central. So the Westfield-Brownsburg game, obviously, you've got two conference foes that know each other well. Brownsburg won that game 17-13. That was the game that was played in the remnants of Hurricane Helene, was played on Saturday, like almost everything else was that weekend, and not Friday. So, how have these two teams changed? Westfield is missing their top receiver. He is out due to injury. They found a way to overcome that. And Brownsburg has just been so resilient, so tough. There is not maybe a player you key on of that group. Maybe Mason Kiefer defensively. Alex Burke was all over the place defensively in that game as well. But it's really kind of a combination of the parts from an offensive standpoint. And so, is that game as competitive the second time around? I expect it to be. I think the Warsaw-Decatur Central game is really interesting. Warsaw, before this year, had won a football sectional. That's it. That was the extent of their postseason football hardware. It was the ultimate basketball community. Bart Curtis took a chance about 7 or 8 years ago, leaving Mishawaka, that he had built into one of the better 4 or 5A programs in the state, to go to Warsaw and try to bring some success, and here they are. And they're a team that they do not throw the football. They have, I think, 31 completions so far this year in 13 games played, and they are playing in a state championship. And it's the second year in a row that in the northern half of 5A, a team that took a chance and played an Indianapolis team in the non-conference window gets rewarded for that experience. And both years it was playing at Warren Central. Warsaw came down week 2, got beat 34-0. But that got them ready for the best end of 5A competition, and it gets them ready to a certain degree for playing a team like Decatur Central, who after a bit of a slow start against a good schedule has been really impressive from, say, about week 4 on. So a lot of storylines in that one, even though it's two teams that have never won a football state championship, knowing we'll have a brand new champ in 5A this year.
And also understand that Western Greene County will be up here. Those that live across the river will invade downtown Indianapolis coming up at 11 a.m. on Friday for the start of things in the 2A affair. That's Linton, the Miners, at Adams Central. Greg Rakestraw is on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Always a pleasure. Stand down with the request until New Year's Eve, okay?
I'll start writing the list down, sir. I absolutely will.
Thank you, brother.
Yep.
It's Greg Rakestraw on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Western Greene County representing. Although it's funny, now I would say, hey, Greene County, great. Yeah, back then I thought, man, what an armpit that is. You get into fights and everything. Linton and Adams Central. New Pal and East Noble also coming up on that Friday with the 3 underway downtown at Lucas Oil Stadium. IHSAA.org to get your tickets today. All right, quick break. We'll come back. Nate Atkins asked the question yesterday, what about accountability for everybody, not just the 22-year-old quarterback? Does he have a point there? We'll talk to Nate coming up about that and more at the top of the hour. And the injuries going into Foxborough on Sunday, those of the new and fresh variety, we'll discuss that coming up too. And Tony East talks Pacers after 5. Stay right there. It's 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Ride with JMV.
Well, we're waiting.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
John here. Thank you for joining us. Jeremiah said, I'm fairly sure that Kevin Bowen stated the other morning on Swebo. God, this is a good-ass song right here. Well done. This was in Goodfellas, right? Was this when the black helicopters are flying over Ray Liotta's head? One of the songs playing right here. Am I right about that? What is that, George Harrison? Who is my life, or what is my life, or what
is my life?
That's a hell of a song. I believe that was in Goodfellas, which really inspires me to want to see Goodfellas again. I don't think you can see Goodfellas enough, in fact. Jeremiah continues here that Swebo evidently said he was going ND over IU if it were to come to fruition. Ooh. But he attended IU, right? Well, that's something right there. I did not hear that. JMV, this should be on a tavern tour stop. Where is this? My brother, I'm trying to look. The Golden Ace Inn? Irish music session Wednesday, close Thursday, pub trivia 8 o'clock. Where is this? Notre Dame SC Saturday, free conies at the half. The Golden Ace Inn. Well, I will put that. Listen, I love when you guys send me advice. Give me heads up on places we need to have a tavern tour stop. That is well done with you right there. So is there accountability for everybody, which is laughable with the Colts because we know that there hasn't been. But Nate Atkins has an article about it. So you bench the quarterback, but everybody else is skipping around happy-go-lucky whenever things aren't working out for him. Is it like that? As I mentioned, I don't think it's altogether like that because there was a reason why, just beyond everything else, that he was benched for 2 weeks. It was a benching of what they felt was convenience and a greater opportunity to win. No matter what anybody says, that's the truth. I know you guys believe me. Nate's going to join us on the other side. Tony East coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. What will it take for the Pacers to prove to you that they get over what has been this stutter step of a start of 24 and 25? What's it going to take? I need to see an ass whipping. I need to see somebody take a beating, and not the Pacers. Obviously, a variety of other things, too. Tony's going to join us. We'll discuss that coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. The Golden Ace is a classic dive tavern stop, according to Aaron Vincent. So, right there. Brothers in Broad Ripple tomorrow. Bud Light Blue Wednesday. You got to join us. I'm assuming, I haven't heard, but I've seen on Instagram where the girls are coming because they put on Instagram that they were coming. They're coming. The celebration, the tradition of what they like to call Blackout Wednesday or High School Hookup Wednesday. Tomorrow, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Brothers in Broad Ripple. Cannot wait to see you. Bud Light Blue Wednesday. Going to be a blast. Nate Atkins, the other side from the Star. AAA Membership Lounge. Become a member today. Do it right now, in fact. That's the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live at 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Greg Rakestraw a little bit earlier, that podcast regarding the high school state finals Friday and Saturday. College football, what Boilermaker fans would rather see happen on Saturday at the Bucket game? It's not a curiosity. Writing's on the wall, or is it? And Tony East is going to join us in the 5 o'clock hour. What would make you happy as a Pacer fan? I mentioned over the next 10 games, I actually started with Milwaukee, and that turned out to be a bust. Second half, I guess, was better than the first, but as it started on Sunday against Washington, and then they went through that last night with a win over New Orleans. What are you looking to see here? And I'd mentioned a little bit earlier to Tony, I want to see them beat somebody down, to kick somebody's ass. And I thought maybe you were going to see it last night, but just as easily as they get out to a 15 to a 7-point advantage, 17, I should say, point advantage, then they lift the door open, and then, this group of Pelicans that you need a roster to find out who the hell's playing out there just gets right back into it. So give us Pacers a reason. I'm glad that Halliburton all of a sudden looks like he's on course, hopefully. But I need to see a team-wide ass whipping. Tomorrow, Portland, maybe Friday, the toilet, whatever. And something we should get back to as well was yesterday, going back to Sunday, and all the Lions fans inside of Lucas Oil Stadium, which was, I think, a point of reference and questions asked yesterday. And we'll talk about Colts and then some right now from the Indianapolis Star. Nate Atkins joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Good afternoon, Nate. I guess we say happy holidays even though we're on the verge of going Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, I guess we're in that mode here. When I was in Detroit, they used to play on Thanksgiving every year, so didn't exactly get that holiday outside of the press box meal that we got in the morning. But, it'll be nice to see a little bit of family this week and then ship out to Boston for another game.
It's funny what you saw at Lucas Oil Stadium on Sunday with all the Lions fans. That used to happen often to the Lions, did it not, before the past couple of years?
Occasionally, but I'll be honest, Lions fans really have a way of sticking with it, and when things are not going well, they turn really angry and they show their anger. It's been a different vibe here covering this Colts season where, granted, they're facing a lot of fan bases that tend to be these big Midwestern traveling fan bases like the Bears and the Steelers and the Bills and the Lions, but I've never really covered a team that's had so many road fans coming in and packing it like this season has so far. But I also, like we've talked about on this show before, I understand where fans are at, the ones who are selling tickets right now, where they just haven't been really energized by this franchise in a little bit. Until that happens, the franchises that do have that hope or that current winning or long-term winning, those are the ones that are going to want to pay for these tickets.
Yeah, well, and you're going to get a big lump sum, especially this time of year, and it's going to pay for a lot of other things, maybe Christmas gifts. Hell, maybe your entire season ticket package if you're not careful. That's opposed to going and being that hardcore fan and watching the same old damn thing that everybody's used to around here.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Is it feels like since 2020 they haven't made the playoffs, but since 2020 they really haven't changed up a lot either as far as kind of the processes they go about, the core foundational players. I think a lot of these fans were looking for new additions to the team. We don't see that a whole lot around here. And then, it's just you go so long without having been, since the pandemic, have not been a playoff team. That's what's just different than those other teams that are coming in. Other than the Bears, the Bears fans packed it when they haven't had a whole lot of success, really any success in that same span either. So I don't know if that was more about Caleb Williams kind of energizing everyone there, or the Bears happen to be a fan base like the Lions. I've covered them as well, who they tend to respond with their anger sometimes too. So I don't know. They're in a tricky spot here at the Colts where they're not. There's some level of anger, but there's just some level of apathy to it too. They need to really go on some kind of run, get to the playoffs, find their quarterback, do something that kind of reels people back in because I think a lot of people are in wait-and-see mode at the moment.
So Nate Atkins of the Stars on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So you mentioned the two teams that you've covered in the past. Their fan base handles it with anger. This fan base is handling it with apathy. But is their voice right now with the team and the organization being heard loud and clear?
Yeah, I will say I do think some levels of anger have crept in here as well. We saw that in the Bills game where they pretty much every time the Colts offense, right when they came out on the field, there were choruses of boos. I think that was directed at the quarterback decision because we didn't see it the same way this past week when the Lions were here. The online voice, it does seem like a lot more unified frustration from the fan base, whereas, at past times when they've struggled, I think 2022 was a little bit more confusion or embarrassment. And then at some other patches in here when they've struggled, it's been a little bit more of that sort of apathy or wait and see. I do think this season has moved it more in a direction of frustration. And I think that plays into sort of selling the tickets too, is almost sort of they're not a team you want to spend your money on at the moment. For some of these fans, they're looking at it that way. And the Colts players do hear that. They heard pretty loud and clear when, the Let's Go Lions chants started the game, and then there were Jared Goff chants by the end of it. And the players are ultimately the ones that really end up feeling this because, they love to be celebrated, and they love to connect with the community, especially defensive players. Like I was asking Zaire Franklin about this. They rely on that crowd, and there's sort of supposed to be this connection in performance between the defense and the energy of the crowd. And when it feels like you're kind of on the road when you're at home, that can be jarring. And I think, honestly, that played into the penalties we saw on Sunday. Not just so much that it was like too loud to hear or make decisions, but more that they were just kind of a little bit shell-shocked. They were a little disoriented and panicking when it felt like not only are they going up against this really good Lions team, but they don't have a crowd at their back. There was no real momentum moment when they couldn't get in the end zone, those two early drives. And so I thought everyone just started to kind of press and panic a little bit. And that's the spot this team is in right now at the moment when they've lost 4 of 5. They've been changing quarterbacks. They've lost kind of what they thought was going to be their strength of the offensive line in the run game. They're in a rut right now where they need to get something positive going, rip off a couple wins in a row where they start to lean on some strengths and eventually switch this so they get some more of their fans back in there, which I think can happen because they're done facing these fan bases I mentioned that want to buy, that really pack road stadiums. I think they have a chance if they can be, after the next 2 road games, they have a chance if they win to 500 or at least right there in the AFC wildcard mix. So when they go up against, back at home against the Titans and the Jaguars, you'd like to think that can be a moment that they get some fans back on their side, but it's also probably going to take more than, a random win like they got against the Jets. People want to kind of feel like they've found a way to play and a way to be on offense that's moving this in the right direction. And I think once they see that, fans will get more on board.
He is Nate Atkins of the Star. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, and he asked the question not too long ago about the level of accountability, which people viewed that as the 2-week grounding or the benching of the 22-year-old quarterback Anthony Richardson as a level of accountability that maybe others are not held up to in this case. And I want you to play off of what you had to say and what you had to write about it. But listen, there hasn't been, and it starts with the general manager. The accountability or lack thereof there. And again, I felt that Richardson, while you wanted him to become a better leader, and there was certainly stuff going on internally to where they weren't happy about things he was doing in that category, I thought also was a benching of convenience because they actually thought over those 2 weeks, that time, that they could be better and win a couple of games with Joe Flacco. What say you?
Yeah, I've said all along, I never saw it as a 2-week benching. I don't think they ever saw it as a 2-week benching. They made that as a switch that was about getting Anthony Richardson to dial in and be more prepared and professional and also just take a breather from the stress of playing and reset a little bit. But it wasn't supposed to be only a 2-week process. I think they really thought that they could sub in a veteran quarterback like they did last year with Gardner Minshew and have a much more functional offense that could win some games and then eventually get them on a path to the playoffs. And whenever they needed or wanted to go back to Anthony Richardson, whether it was an injury that caused it or if late in the season maybe there was a dip in play or maybe they get to the offseason, I think that's what they were planning on. So it just so happened that the Joe Flacco-led offense was so bad that there wasn't an argument that he was the better quarterback or that they were a better offense with him anymore. And so they were kind of losing on the long term and the short term doing that. But that accountability discussion, I mean, you can look at it several different ways. You could take it back to 2022 was the low of lows for this franchise, and they kind of rolled back everything except for the play callers and the quarterback. And that's, you mentioned the general manager and the whole front office, but it goes also to an entire defensive coaching staff and almost all the foundational players. Really, they didn't move off any players other than Shaquille Leonard. The next year, lost his ability to play physically, and so they moved off of him. But there haven't really been moves to replace or upgrade or change at a lot of these positions. So I take this back, especially to this past offseason, where the Colts were coming off a 9-8 season that was certainly encouraging and better than a lot of us thought they were going to do with a backup quarterback. But they decided to just run that back, whereas, on one hand, you could upgrade it if you wanted to be a real contender, but also you could fight off the regression that comes when, they got some career years out of players last year. They really squeezed a lot of juice out of, for example, the tight end room and the way they schemed those guys up and got them opportunities on trick plays and occasional moments that they were banking on in a way that they didn't necessarily have to. They didn't bring in a single new starter, honestly. The one starter they've got in that process, Leatu Latu, now he was always going to play as the 15th pick, but the door opened for him when Samson Ebukam got hurt. But nobody else was really counted on to come in and take a role. And so some guys got to just move up when, Zach Moss leaving, for example, moved Tyler Goodson and Trey Sermon up the depth chart. Injury to Jelani Woods just moved guys tight end up the depth chart. And some guys got to come back that ultimately the coaching staff has decided they don't really want to use very much. There's two veteran offensive linemen on this team in Danny Pinter and Josh Sills, who should be depth options when you have three starters injured in the offensive line, but they haven't wanted to go there. So you're just in this weird spot where they didn't make improvements on positions, and then they're stuck putting guys in that I don't think the coaching staff really feels like are the answers, but they've had to be the answers because they were on the roster first. And so that's where it became a little mixed messaging to me to bench Anthony Richardson and make it so much about you have to rise to our standard. There hasn't been a good standard here since at least the 2020 season. And so I don't know what standard he can rise to that you can lay out there. And then I thought Sunday just really encapsulated that, where I thought he played reasonably well. He played pretty much the similar game to what he did in New York, where there was some good passes, some good footwork, and a couple of explosive passes, but also he was able to get the run game going, and it was just everything else around him, from the penalties to the pass protection to the lack of a run game with Jonathan Taylor to a couple of drops. Everything kind of went wrong around him and just showcased that, like, these other players have never been threatened with benchings or replacements in the offseason the way that their quarterback was. He responded to it in the way that they hoped for, and the rest of the team right now is not evolving, and they're not ready for him to raise his level when they didn't ever have a level for him to get to.
So is this, as you mentioned, in this case, is it mixed messaging that leads to confusion in the locker room? I mean, some anger in the. What does this all lead to? Because you mentioned a little bit earlier, 10 penalties that you have the week before Thanksgiving is a joke, and that's reflective on the coaching. And now you have what you're talking about right here. Is this all leading them down a path again to just be not a well coached team? Is that where we begin with all of this, is in terms of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think the issues that they're going through right now, I think you can pin them pretty equally on the front office and the coaching staff. Like, they've had some issues pop up that have been tough. Losing 3 offensive linemen, is kind of the front of that. And then some injuries at wide receiver, like their wide receiver one, Michael Pittman Jr., not being the same thing. That's a lot to take out of an offense. But it goes to show that they didn't really have a lot of plans, great plans for some of this. For example, wide receiver last year, they only missed one game out of that entire starting three. Michael Pittman missed one game, and Josh Downs and Alec Pierce played every single game. And so they weren't going to be able to count on that the same way this year. Well, they drafted a player in the second round in A.D. Mitchell, who is a long-term play, fell to the second round because although he's super talented, he's raw and not ready. That's what we're seeing out there. And so if you're going to make that your choice as a wide receiver 4, you've got to be able to compensate with some tight ends and running backs who can catch the football, but they didn't go out and add any of those. And then some of the ones that they have that they could play more, there's a disconnect between the players they put out there and the coaching staff's willingness to use them. Will Mallory is an example of that. He's been inactive the past couple of weeks when the tight ends above him are not getting it done. I mentioned a couple of those veteran offensive linemen that clearly the front office liked enough to bring Danny Pinner back off of a broken leg, and the coaching staff has not wanted to put him out there, even though they're putting out an undrafted rookie at right guard and Dalton Tucker, who's having a time right now. And so whether it's the coaches relying on putting players in positions that's a bit over their head because they haven't played before and done as much, that's been some of the issue. I think this offensive coaching staff has very much been focused on plays over players, and then the players at some of these depth spots are not good enough for some of those plays, and it's creating a trust disconnect between the roster and the coaches and how they want to use them. And so it's not what we saw last year when Shane Steichen, it felt like, could come up with a lot of answers to whether they lost Jonathan Taylor or they lost Anthony Richardson or some of the different issues that they had pop up along the way. We're not seeing quite that same quality of coaching adjustments this year, and I think the roster has declined also in the process of that because they had players coming off career years who are naturally going to regress some. And so then that's where it does, as far as how the locker room looks at it, it does lead to some occasional issues. When you lose, that's what's going to happen, and that's what I think you heard with some of the defensive players talking about the lack of focus and preparation. I think some of that comes too when players weren't really forced to earn and keep their jobs the same way. The only benching that any player has suffered from week 17 last year till now is Anthony Richardson, and so I think that's one of the issues that's sitting with them right now. Is it's just gotten a little too comfortable around here, and so once you start losing, that's when people get uncomfortable. But you need to be uncomfortable before that to really be able to seek out those solutions ahead of time rather than avoid panic. And panic is what plays in things like those penalties you saw on Sunday.
It's Nate Atkins of the Star with us. What type of season do you believe Shane Steichen's having as a coach?
This has definitely been a big step back for him last year. That was probably to be expected because last year he had a great year. This year has not been a particularly great year for him. I thought it just was all kind of off kilter by week 2, I thought, when we talked, and it went to Green Bay, and when the run game was working really well early, but they weren't finishing it with drives, and they fell down by a score. They just threw it all out and wanted to throw the ball like crazy. Took Jonathan Taylor out, and that's where you saw him lean into the plays over players, and really at the heart of it, I think he's leaned into his idea of being explosive through the air, always coming back through the passing game on a team that's built to run the ball. So the guys that the franchise has paid were a running back, a guard, a center, a right tackle. Those are all the contracts outside of one wide receiver contract. And then their tight ends are built to be blockers. Like, they're built to be a run-the-ball team, especially with a mobile quarterback who is developing as a passer. And I just don't think, for the most part, he's leaned into the strengths of the roster. Instead, I think he's put them in a lot of the weaknesses of their roster, and that's why they've struggled, and they've struggled whether they've gone with Anthony Richardson or to Joe Flacco. I think that really exposed how they were not built to be this passing team that a veteran quarterback could just step into and manage really, really well. And I think, he got out of that against the Jets. I thought he had a great game plan then. I thought that 2-week benching gave them a good chance to reconfigure what the Anthony Richardson offense would look like, and they came into last week with a similar plan by running Anthony Richardson, by running heavy early with him and Jonathan Taylor. It's just when they fell down in that game, he fell back into his worst habits again, which is just pass all the time. They had one carry to Jonathan Taylor in the second half last week, and I understand the run game was really, really bad, but he's the best chance they have at gaining an explosive play, and it also gives it helps manage the risk of the offense, and it helps give a breather to these offensive linemen who are dropping back. And so, one point that Alec Pierce made after the game is that when they want to run deep passing plays, play after play after play, you're asking these offensive linemen who have pass rushers in their head to drop back and play backward, and a quarterback to hold onto the ball and try and make low percentage passes. And it just is not a way to come back unless maybe you're the Cincinnati Bengals or a team that's really loaded to do that. Obviously, when it's the 5 minutes of a game, you have no choice. But they do this way too early in games where they'll be down like 10 points early in the third quarter, and they just act like they have to just throw every single play, and they're not built to do it. And so Shane's got to get back to playing to the strengths of this roster because he's super creative, and when he does that, we saw last year, we saw in that Jets game, they can win that way, and they can get Anthony Richardson feeling good and being a part of the success that way. But when they lean into just drop-back passing with how they're currently constructed, they're just kind of letting defenses tee off on them at the moment. So overall, I don't think this has been the year that Shane Steichen has wanted to have.
It's Nate Atkins of the Star. He's kind enough to join us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Very, very quick before I let you go here. Everybody organizationally on the same page with Richardson being the guy, or might there be some differing opinions there?
I think they're all in wait-and-see mode. I think they introduced some doubt when they benched him in the first place. They knew there was risk to that, and when they would bring him back and how he would respond when he comes back. And they were taking 2 games out of at least 2, and they thought more the time out of the evaluation of it. And so there's certainly hope, and there's some inspiration based on what he's done the past 2 weeks. I think is a lot of how they hoped he would respond to that. But they have to see it come together. They have to see him. There's a lot of boxes he still has to check as far as, being able to stay on the field if they're going to run him like they're running him, keeping up that leadership and professionalism, even, through the losing and the frustrations like we saw on Sunday, and building on that accuracy and taking care of the ball that, has mostly been there the past 2 weeks, but, it didn't turn into the results this past week for a number of reasons. They just got to see a lot of this come together and see strides where, overall in the season, he's still below 50% completions. He is still, more interceptions than touchdowns. So it's got to build through these final 5 games to give them that hope. So I think if they were ever that sold, they wouldn't have done the benching in the first place. But everyone does hope that it turns around and works this way, because there isn't, they don't want to get back into what they were in before that, which is, having not enough good of a draft pick to find a solution, but not really good options in free agency, and just not really having answers at the most important position in a conference where the quarterbacks kind of dictate how far everyone goes in the playoffs. So everyone needs this to work, and they need this to start coming together right now.
It's Nate Atkins of the Star on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Have a fantastic Thanksgiving in whatever means in which you choose or are able to celebrate it. And we'll catch up again here coming up relatively soon. Nate, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Nate Atkins of the Star, the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. A lot, I should say, there for you to chew on. It's kind of interesting if you're watching as we have on UConn and Colorado and the Maui Invitational right now. It's one thing for Danny Hurley. I mean, he's got that reputation, winning, no doubt, going back to back, but also the reputation on the sideline with his antics and the screaming and the yelling and like a madman. And it's one thing for him to do it, but his team does it. After every whistle, it's very NBA-esque. After every whistle, they have a similar reaction as their coach. And I'm assuming that you wouldn't want that. I mean, you want your guys invested. I just don't think in that particular fashion. But after every whistle, these guys are throwing a fit. Very NBA-like. Quick one, we'll come back. Tony East, speaking of that, top of the hour, Pacers a winner last night, 2 consecutive. Portland at the Fieldhouse tomorrow night. What will it take for you to feel good regarding the Pacers? Again, that's a question we'll talk about with Tony East coming up at the 5 o'clock hour. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Hans, Bobby, I'm your white knight.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Nate Atkins of the Star Podcast, 107.5thefan.com. Well, this is really good OMD song right here. Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, James. Greenwood Red says traffic everywhere on the south side is FUBAR. There are more orange cones on the south side than there are actual vehicles on the road. That's incredible. And traffic, and it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to run into FUBAR. Traffic everywhere on the south side is FUBAR. Give me your south side updates. JMV, this is from Andrew. Human nature says the Pacers will get blown out one of these two around the holiday games. My pick is tomorrow night. Actually, you're talking about Cunningham being Andrew on Friday night against the Toilet. Tomorrow night, that is the offer sheet game with the Portland Trail Blazers, everybody. Tony Donahue checks in. JMV just had great service from Curtis. Shadeland Avenue Express Pro Tire and Auto. 13 Central Indiana locations. Scam likely. I always get a scam likely from area code 463. Anybody else get scam likely from 463? I bet I get a scam likely every day. Anybody ever answer scam lightly and it's not a scam? Just out of curiosity. Because that does persuade you not to answer it. But again, back to Express Pro Tire and Auto, 13 Central Indiana Joe Childers run locations. Curtis, go in there and say hello to Curtis at Shadeland Avenue, East Side. Well done, Tony Donahue. JMV, here's the Golden Ace Inn's address. East Washington Street, Jim McCann. Yeah, 2533 East Washington. It has been advised to me that the Golden Ace Inn from BT Dune needs to be a tavern tour stop at some point. I'll be down with that program. I'm telling you, I absolutely loved the checkered flag on Friday. It was such a good time. And I think his name was it Corey Eichard that played when I was done, the country music guy? Hell, he's about 6'6". No, that's a good time. I love the checkered flag. Shout out to Stacy and everybody over there. Also, I wanted to give another shout. So I go to see Morrissey on Friday night, James. Morrissey, formerly of the Smiths. And it was a really fortunate Friday night at the Murrah Old National Center. Jimi Hendrix and Daniel and everybody over there. Awesome time. Sold out, in fact, was Morrissey. But it was good fortune because he came in great voice and great mood. He was of great voice, was Morrissey, but he actually came in a decent mood.
He didn't storm off the stage or
No
anything?
storming or anything. He threw his tie out to people. He had a concert shirt, a Morrissey concert shirt that he had written himself, clearly, Indiana on top of it, and he took that off and threw it out to the fans. But now he was in a hell of a mood. I thought he was great. He did not do Suede Head, which I found surprising considering they shot the video in February of 1988 in both Gas City and Fairmount. So I thought sure he would do that here. He did not. I think they're sticking to basically the set list you see around the country on their tour. And really not a lot of old school Smith songs. He did do How Soon Is Now. But it was a great-ass show, man. And I met, you guys know, let me make sure I get this accurately here, Slater Hogan, who runs the, hold on.
Unrelated to Hulk Hogan?
Patron Saint and the Saint Shack downtown. I believe that's on Meridian, right? Saint
yes.
Shack has done advertising here before after Pacer games, but he runs that. Evidently, he's like world-class in pickleball. I had no idea. And he's an EDM DJ. I didn't know that either. So we struck up a conversation right there with Slater Hogan, who was a fantastic dude.
So if he's world-class in pickleball,
yeah,
and we do this pickleball event, if we ever get that back on the schedule again,
yes,
Are you going to go one-on-one with him?
I will go one-on-one. I'm ready.
You're going to school him, right?
Because I'll be weighing about 150 pounds by then. But no, Slater Hogan, and it is downtown, the patron saint. It is funny because Blake likes the EDM stuff, so we got to talking about guys like John Summit, and obviously the ones that aren't so hardcore, John Summit and David Guetta and Calvin Harris, and then you get a little bit more. You get the Diplos and I think what's the Excism or whatever the hell that is. Wooly, like I went a couple of weeks ago to see. Tony says Slater's a great dude. You've actually played hoop with him back in the Butler noon hoop days and played tennis at Butler. Great dude. Slater, so he's seen me playing hoop before, so he may have had his ass whipped. But great guy. I want to check it out. I want to learn how to mix one of these. I half-ass. I'm an awful mixer. Awful. Got to get better. Corey Elliott writes this, so it's been 11 years since I was an intern at the Fan, and you and I are both still the same age. It's crazy. Happy Thanksgiving. Indeed we are. The awesome Bobby Jefferson chimes in. So I get the daily 463 scam call, too. The one time I answered it was some online pharmacy promoting discounted ED medication. How discounted are we talking about there, Bobby? How cheap? And what level of ED medication? JMV, my wife is saved and my phone is spam likely. Bill, that's well done out of you right there. JMV, why aren't we seeing more A.D. Mitchell? If the argument is AR's raw and just needs more reps, why doesn't the same apply to him? Well, that was the point we were making. And in fact, an article that Nate Atkins of the Star, who just joined us, had a couple of days ago was, hey, you know what? You got accountability all the way around. I should say you got accountability with the quarterback, but you don't have accountability with everybody else. And as I mentioned, it was more a convenient accountability. It was an accountability because you wasn't on time often, and they were tired of it, and you're taking notes and all this stuff that is compartmentalized inside the facility in preparation leading up to Sunday. And it was convenient because they felt at the time when they made the change, Joe Flacco gave them a better opportunity to win. So that's the convenience that I'm talking about here. So it was easy. But the problem that you have, if you're going to try to thrust in a level of accountability, you've had 8 years from a general manager. Where's that? Where's that accountability? Let's just think about it. A lot of general managers don't last 8 years if they win a Super Bowl over the span of those 8 years. Now, you can't have that resume and think you're going to stick around for 8 years. It has been incredible. So, no, it does. It was meaningful in terms of preparation and leadership, but again, it was convenience because they felt that Joe Flacco at that moment gave them the better chance to win, and then they found out in 2 weeks what the hell's happening here. And then they go back to the 22-year-old and they say, hey, all is better. And then he goes out against the worst team in the NFL and performs at a high level, and everybody thinks everything is great and the decision was great. And, obviously he got benched and he woke up and all that's baloney. No, he just played better against a bad team, as he should, and hopefully he continues to play better. But it was convenience. It was convenience, and it was preparation. It was daily work, effort, habits, all the above. All right, quick break. We shall return, according to James. So Tony East at the top of the hour, he'd asked me a question. I did a podcast with him. I don't know if it's released just yet. But he asked me a question about what's it going to take for me to be a believer. And I'm hanging out there. I'm flapping in the breeze, literally, because I have made so much out of, hey, I love this. What a great move. And the way the Pacers have played so far this year, it makes me look like a horse's ass, which I look like that enough. I don't need anybody else's help to do it. So let's put this thing into gear. and he asked me what I need to see. I'll explain that. We'll talk to Tony about that coming up at the top of the hour, too. And Chad makes a good point regarding Danny Hurley that I made a little bit earlier as well. Hey, tomorrow in Broad Ripple, that's a Bud Light Blue Wednesday. We have Colts tickets to give away, and we're at Brothers. The tradition continues. Brothers in Broad Ripple. And if you say B-Rip, I may have to cuss you out because I hate that. You don't say B-Rip, do you? Do you just immediately announce your presence with nerdy, dorky authority when you say B-Rip? Do you? Hey, I got a show at B-Rip. You just say, I'm the biggest nerd on the planet.
Is that kind of the same way you view when somebody says sirs in referring to the Pacers?
God. I'm telling you, I think that there's a deeper reason why the Pacers have struggled so far, and I think that's the reason why.
Because of the sirs nickname?
It sucks. It's always sucked. It always will suck. And I'm sure they put a lot of time and effort and probably some monetary figures into it. But damn, it's awful. It was awful when you first did it. And I'm not mad at everything they do. I love what they did. But good God, you could lose the yes sirs or the sirs tomorrow. And I think that automatically makes you a better organization and team because it sucks.
So if they drop that, would they be your pick to win the NBA Finals automatically?
Well, they should be my pick right now because I'm so deeply invested into it. But God, whoever came up with that idea, that is absolutely an online nerd right there. Oh, yeah, sir. It's awful. It's awful.
It was probably some marketing guy that had the great idea for it.
And I'm assuming they're too far down because now after every win, it's yes, sirs. Hashtag yes, sirs. Do they do the hashtag, Sue?
I believe they do.
What if I say, what if it's hashtag yes, curs? What if they say, pronounce the C, not sirs, as in S-I-R-S, but curs? I should say curs. Yes, cur. What the hell does yes, curs mean?
I think you technically could, but that may be grammatically incorrect.
Well, hey, listen, it's not like you're dealing with the sharpest tool in the drawer right here, so be careful. They could lose that in an hour, and nothing would make me happier. On a quick break, we'll come back. Does that make me old? I don't think I'm old man yelling at I just think it's stupid. Right? There's a lot. Listen, I think we've all understood now that I'm in the world of EDM and laser light shows and guys named Wooly and eating cottage cheese at EDM shows.
So you're hip, is what you're saying.
I've got a little bit of hipness and freshness.
You're down with the youth.
I no longer just reek of 1985. Quick one, we'll come back. A little update going on college basketball. Road show tomorrow. And, yeah, you should join us. There's no question about that. Tony East, top of the hour, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
IU Louisville coming up tomorrow at noon. That means an 11 o'clock start. So that's over on 93 WYBC, right? That is coming up tomorrow. We're going to be in Broad Ripple at Brothers. I would love to see you tomorrow. Bud Light Blue Wednesday. I think we're going to have the whole hee-haw gang there coming up tomorrow. So would love to see you. We got tickets to give away tomorrow, Colts tickets and more. And I think I'm going to get up there early enough. I'm going to watch a little bit of hoop around noon. So, hell, if you guys want to come out early, then join me early. We'll hang out a little bit. I didn't mention this regarding Danny Hurley. I'm not a big hater. In fact, I love the results, and who wouldn't, that he gets out of his team and what he's doing with college basketball right now. And believe me, officials just should tee his ass up, much like he got yesterday, which you could argue that cost them that game against Memphis in overtime. Just tee his ass up, especially if he's going to say to you what he said yesterday. I think the problem I would have with this is his guys act like that after every whistle. And while I know that there is a substantial trickle down that happens because the NBA constantly whine and cry about the whistles, much like I do about the Sirs, that to me is what I wouldn't want with my team. I want them playing hard, and clearly they have an edge. Although just up 4 right now over Colorado. About 15.5 to go in the second half of the Maui Invitational. Again, both teams lost yesterday. Colorado to Michigan State, UConn in overtime to Memphis. Those two teams, the Tigers and Sparty, meet later on this evening. However, I don't think I would want, and not just the occasional dude, but like all of them act like that. Maybe Caravan is the only one that doesn't so much. Everybody else just always has that, and not just a befuddled look with your arms up, but just ready to go nuts. I don't know if I'd want that. However, these guys are ass whippers. There's no question about that. Now, once upon a time, Liam McNeely was an IU recruit. Of course, he flipped and goes to UConn, and he was pretty good in the first half. He was pretty good yesterday, too, especially helped get them. They were down 13 late in the game, about the 4-minute mark of the second half, and then came from behind, ultimately tied it up. I mean, the officials probably should deal with them all the way that they deal with Early. But you kind of wonder, maybe we see that come to more of a head with the players as we move forward here. JMV to the human rototiller come up with the yes sirs. The human rototiller is that's the greatest all-time nickname right there. But Chad remarks with this: your comment on UConn reminds me of when Paul George used to leave the Pacers a man down after whining after every missed shot. That diva was just waiting to eventually come out for good. I will tell you somebody else, and I was watching him last night, and he still does it all the time, and that's Domas Sabonis. Sabonis will stay and have a stinking conversation about a non-call with an official while his team is getting their ass whipped on the other end. And that started here. Remember, we called it a bad whistle back then. The bad whistle turned into him kind of standing around and wanting to have a debate with the official while his team's like 5-on-4 on the other end. And it happened again last night. I was watching OKC, which is really good. I think Jalen Williams is one of my favorite players in the NBA. OKC. He's fun as hell to watch. We all kind of joked about Sam Presti and what he did with that team, that roster, and all their picks. But that is a fun team to watch. And Isaiah Hartenstein fits in fantastically with him. We'll see when Holmgren gets back. But it was an interesting watch last night with OKC in Sacramento. But no, the point you're making, Chad, is what Sabonis still does right now in Sacramento. Even as good as he is, still does that. Quick break. We shall return. Tony East on the other side. What is going to make you feel better about the Pacers? Short term, and I guess eventually in the longer term. Tony and I discuss next.
The Ride with JMV.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Awesome re-entry. Almost a year ago, I saw this group. Yeah, just Mike Score, I think, is the only guy remaining. A Flock of Seagulls. He does not look like a flock of seagulls any longer. He is bald. No flock of seagulls hair. Great time, though. It really was. Hey, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us. Colts Deli Update. Matt Taylor coming up here at the top of the 6 o'clock hour. Tomorrow we celebrate in Broad Ripple, and as the nerds say, B-Rip. Tomorrow, Bud Light Blue Wednesday. Yeah. We're going to have some drinks, some beers. We're going to give away some Colts tickets. IU Louisville tips at noon from the Bahamas. So we'll check that out. Just have one hellaciously awesome time coming up tomorrow. And then the rest of the week, I think we're off, right? Thursday and Friday. I'm going up to Sullivan Hardware and Garden on Friday. That's the annual thing. That's a tradition. We'll do that. And hell, I don't know, the rest of the weekend. No JMV takeover for a month. I don't know what I'm going to do with my time. I may go down and watch our good friend, my new friend, Slater Hogan. Kyle Knezovich actually just got a hold of me and said that he considers himself, Kyle does, a decent tennis player, and he got waxed, dusted by Slater Hogan, who played tennis at Butler. Noted EDM DJ, if they like to be called that. Nice. So, yeah, got some time. Yeah, maybe Bloomington I was thinking about. I know that I've got little invites to several tailgates for the bucket game. May end up doing that. Yeah, it's going to be a great weekend at Bloomington, right? Saturday night. Turning back the clock to the good old days right there. Meantime, Andy Moore, Automotive Group Hotline. I have put the invite out tomorrow if his car is fixed. And had he taken it to Express Pro Tire and Auto, it would be fixed and good to go. And he could join us tomorrow on Broad Ripple. Brothers, Tony East, among other things. Locked On Pacers, WTHR.com, and Forbes Sports. How you doing, Tony?
The car is fixed. I have to go pick it up now. So there's a chance. There's
a chance. Good. Yeah, we'll throw a couple down you and get you down there just in time to talk to Rick.
That's right. There we go.
Get ready. Now, what podcast was I on with you today? What was that?
Yes, that's right. Locked On Pacers tomorrow. You can hear
I'm locked.
JMV on this,
locked on Pacers.
Look at you. That's right. First time. So if you want to hear more JMV on these, many of these topics we're about to hit on.
I was an incredible tease early in the show about this too. I told everybody what I was looking for to get us into the podcast and the expectation of that. Once you release it as well, I think we're both kind of looking for the same thing. We thought we were going to get it last night, beating the hell out of a bad team. They got up 15, then got up 17, and kind of yacked up two different leads. Unfortunately, is there a chance we're going to see that on what remains here on Wednesday and on Friday in this 4-game homestand? Because we should see it.
Yeah, I believe the last 4 minutes of the first quarter and the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, if you put those together, it was 32-6 New Orleans, right? Like they just crapped all over themselves after getting big leads, and they have not been able to do that to anybody of any quality this year. They've had good wins, obviously. They've played well for at least some stretches of major games, but they have not clobbered anybody or even shown that high of a level at all this year, and they did that last year quite often, even though they still had some bad losses last year. There's a chance tomorrow they play Portland, who isn't good and is pretty injured, and they turn the ball over a gazillion times a game and have a head coach in the final year of his contract and may not be trying to win, and then they play the Pistons on Friday, and hey, the Pistons are actually pretty good, but the Pacers already beat them once. I think they have 6 wins in a row against Detroit, so that's 2 games they could win. They've got to show some level of just like we can pummel a team for 48 minutes that they have not even gotten close to for a variety of reasons. And I think last night, which was their best chance at it, it was their bench not humming in the first half at all. And once they made some changes, they were better. But they have yet to show that at all this year, despite doing it quite often last year.
So, does and I told you this a little bit earlier today. Chad Buchanan is going to give me the offer sheet that they signed DeAndre Ayton to a couple of summers ago. I'm going to hang that on my wall, and he's not playing with a finger injury, correct? His finger. That's how we say it in Southern Indiana. Finger. What's going on with his finger injury? Will we see him tomorrow?
I saw he got hurt. I did not know exactly what it was, but I would not suspect so. And the thing with Portland is I would wager that they will be very conservative, let's say, with injuries this season. They also have Donovan Clingan and Rob Williams and Duop Reed. They have a lot of other centers. So I think they'll be okay.
And Klingon's injured too, evidently.
Oh,
now,
man.
I will tell you this.
Here.
When Jeremy Grant plays against the Pacers, he normally goes for about 40.
That's true. But they haven't played him since the Siakam trade. But, yes, he was in the category of wings that for 4 years everybody said, why couldn't they stop Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Grant? Why are those guys repping up the Pacers every time?
He does.
I want to know before we go. I want to know where Chad keeps the DeAndre Ayton offer sheet before he gives it to you. Where is that for him?
He says he has it, yeah.
Is it somewhere like in a safe that he doesn't want to see it anymore? Is it somewhere prominent? That'd be interesting to know.
Well, yeah, I guess they take it well because it's actually me teasing them for what was about to be a horrible decision. So they take it really well, to be honest with you.
That is true, but at the time, do you remember, though, at the time, one, people wanted him because people thought he was better than he is, but two, was like, that was the biggest contract they'd ever offered anybody. Like,
yeah.
It was kind of a big moment for them, like in a turning point.
It lasted like 2.5 hours. Remember, it was 2.5 hours of euphoria for many, yeah.
It felt like 4 minutes, but I'm sure it was 2.5 hours. Yeah.
You were like, wait a minute. I mean, they matched it, and really, that put the Suns in a bad spot that they had to wiggle out of. They're always in a bunch of bad spots to try to wiggle out of, I guess. So
one of those moments that, well, you'll never remember it because he was never on the Pacers, but just like potentially a key turning point to get to where they are now. Very fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Hey, while we're on it, too, another reason why I want to see them kick this into gear is because they could have significant decisions if they continue to scuffle all the way to the trade deadline, correct?
Totally, and usually it's always the guys with expiring contracts that those discussions are about. Well, guess what? One of those guys, and the only guy, is Miles Turner, a very, very significant piece who has been in trade discussions every year, basically, except for last year of his entire career, and he cannot be extended, so he's going to be an expiring contract. Look, the thought was, and I still think this is very possible, is that they'd be good enough that it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't even think about trading a starter. They would just roll with their best players all season and then figure it out in free agency. But, if they're a 500 or worse team, it changes how you think about things. And, they're expensive too. They have money to think about. Now, don't get me wrong. They've planned for everything. They're not dumb, but certainly the way they've started and Turner's season, I think he's been fine. He's had some excellent games, certainly. It's going to be a topic again, and it'll be a topic into the summer if he's still on the team. It's how his life is at this point, right? But if they were 13-7, 12-8 even, I think we'd be saying, or whatever, they played 18 games, 10-8, whatever. This would not even be a discussion, right? Obviously, they should keep their best players and try to repeat what they did last year, but if they keep floundering and can't find some footing, it's totally going to be a different discussion by February.
I guess my point is, how bad would they have to be and look for them to go ahead and feel like they need to start Moses Brown the rest of the year?
Yeah, that would be something, right? Because even if they decide to move on for contract reasons, I mean, a team with Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton, like, you can't – it's hard to even put that team in the gutter, right? Like, how would you even go about something like that to change direction? So it almost feel like a shift of the you remember Kevin Pritchard's analogy about turning the boat. It'd be like a small shift of the boat if they had to do something like that because they don't have any backups who can play big minutes right now. It'd be a tough reality no matter what. But if you're at a point where you're thinking about it already, I guess you're having to make those tough calls.
I would think that it would have to be, that would be, I think for them to do something at the trade deadline, considering the circumstances right now, the season would have to devolve into a disaster, would it not?
Yes, I agree. Disaster, like much worse than now level disaster. Right. And to even go further, like, I almost feel like it'd have to be a disaster with one of their stars getting hurt, right? Because the East isn't any good. You could trip to 43 wins and be the 7 seed or 6 seed and be in the postseason. And if you get the 6 seed, you avoid the Cavs and Celtics. We saw what the Pacers did with the 6 seed last year, right? Like, you don't have to be that. I think the 6 seed in the East right now is under 500, right? Like, you don't have to be that good to be in the mix. So I think the only way it would be a holy cow level move from them is if Halliburton or Siakam got hurt, because any other reality they couldn't compete with a lot of teams. They already beat Boston this year.
It's, Tony East joins us. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. We're both looking for blowouts against either Portland or the Pistons. I don't know if either one will be coming, but that's what we want. Well, what else are we looking for? And I guess we'll start with the injuries. Who's going to get back first here as far as Neesmith, Nembhard, Shepard? Looks like Shepard's been pushed back a little bit right here, but of the three, who ends up getting back here first?
Yeah, I would assume Andrew Nembhard, just based on the timelines we've been given and what I can see them do, right? I think yesterday was the first time I saw Aaron Neesmith do any on-court work since his injury. He just got out of a boot. Again, of what I can see, maybe this timeline's off by a day or two, but like a little over a week ago, and he was on the court but just doing floaters, no jumpers, not really running, and Andrew Nembhard's been defending and running hard with the ball and taking tougher shots, and the whatever bandages are on his knee is a little different. So I'd assume he's the closest, and oblique things like what Ben Shepard has, like those hurt, man. It's hard to twist. Your hips hurt the whole time. Like if they're really bad and it's torn or like it messes up your ribs or something, like those can be killer. So I'd imagine that Nembhard's the first back, and it's even possible Neesmith returns before Shepard, but we'll see where that goes. That hurts. They've been missing wings. Like they had to play Ben Mathurin almost 80 minutes the last two nights on this back-to-back because they're so light, and Furphy was out too, although that sounds like it's a little more minor. So man, it's crazy because last year they were so healthy that people forgot that this is even like a possibility in the NBA, that you just get so banged up, it changes your season a ton, but it kind of snowballs. Guys play more minutes than they're used to. They play different roles, and it just keeps going.
It was really drunk last night that former most recent Mad Ant Elfric Payton went for 21 assists. My man almost had a triple-double with 21 assists. That's nuts.
He was awesome, and he was, to be clear, he was a triple-double machine for the Mad Ants like last year. It's just like in theory, his style of player is not really one that dominates like that in the NBA anymore, like the not really great shooting, high volume point guard. But if you can pass like that and the pick and roll coverage can't stop you from throwing that lob to Yves Missi all night, then yeah, you're gonna go crazy. They were chasing him around all night, and when they finally would get the pick and roll part down, he would just throw it over to C.J. McCollum or Trey Murphy for a three. He was awesome. And I think the concerning part of that, besides that he was with the Mad Ants and he's used to that building, is that coverage just didn't work all night. They couldn't adjust to it quick enough, and the Pelicans kept finding ways to burn him. They kept going to the same kind of things over and over, and I get that it's a guy who's been in the league for 3 days. You kind of expect eventually it'll wear off, but it never did. It was crazy.
So Tony East talks Pacers with us. Pacers-Blazers coming up tomorrow night, the third of 4 straight at home. Friday against the Pistons of Detroit. Tyrese Halliburton, 9 threes, 9 of 18 from distance last night. He has played well in the last 2. I guess you could argue the second half against the Bucks in that loss as well. Are we seeing him now start to put things together? Was it the level of competition that he has seen? What do you think, at least in the last 2?
Yeah, I think that in the last 10 quarters, he's made 50% of his threes, right? So that's a long stretch for him, given how this season has started. And a lot of what he was doing poorly was just missing. I don't want to make it that simple, but sometimes it is. Like taking shots he made last year but not making them this year. And they need him to make them. At the same time, he couldn't get by guys as easily, and he's looked a little more mobile and shifty in these home games this week. So maybe a turning point for him just to see some shots go down. I think specifically last night will be one I remember just because he hit 9 threes. He matched the Pelicans alone. And before that, his previous high this season was 5. His highest 2 games of made threes entering Monday was 9 combined, and he made 9 last night. So if that is a turning point where he just starts being able to do what he did last year, which was – it felt like every 3 he took, no matter how hard it was, had a chance to go in, whereas right now it feels like the opposite. I think that'd be huge for them, right? Like the reason their identity is what it is with the pace and the passing and they can score 140 some nights and it's not that weird, was him. And that has not been the case this year. In his best games, they can sniff 130, but they haven't had that level from him very often. They got it Monday. They got it against the Knicks 2 weeks before that. And if he can keep this run going, even if it's against crappy teams that like he should just kill anyway, I think the Pacers would be thrilled just to see that that's still in him and it's still possible for him to get hot and get going because they haven't seen that and they've been worse as a result.
Is it a trend right now? Really weird kind of second half Siakam stuff? What's happening here?
Oh, that is so goofy. This was a couple of games ago I looked this up, so this probably isn't exactly accurate now, but after the Houston game where he had 20-something in the first half, after that game, he was taking over 9 shots a game in the first half of games and only about 5.1 in the second half of games. And I quite frankly don't really have a good answer for why. That's probably something I should have asked about by now because it's very weird, right? He's a great player, and the reason he would be shooting a lot in the first half is because he's scoring a lot, right? He's been terrific this season. He's been by far their most consistent, reliable contributor, and I don't really get why they would turn away from him so much. I mean, some nights, like that Houston game, for example, they put Dylan Brooks on Siakam in the second half instead of I forget who it was, in the first half. It's like, okay, maybe that is part of why they aren't as enthused by it. But for example, Charlotte, that game was just painful where they went up 10 in the third quarter with Siakam carrying them to a lead and finally making them look credible. And they take him out. They give up that lead. He comes back in. It feels like he never touched the ball. The ball doesn't get to him. It's so station to station. It doesn't find their best players as often. It's been a weird trend that I can't really figure out why. Maybe it's just that they're trying too long to get him into a matchup they like, or they're just getting too much into guard actions. But that's something they've got to get out of, I think, because he's been rock solid this season from everywhere on the floor.
How comfortable are they right now or this season in the half court?
Yeah, it doesn't look very comfortable.
It looks like that they don't. Discombobulation to me.
What I wrote in my notes that I can't even perfectly articulate this. I've been trying to explain it to people. Is like it feels like there's a couple possessions every quarter where they're just throwing it around the perimeter, but not for a reason. It's just like because they should be moving the ball and trying to find something and see what works. It's not necessarily bad to pass the ball. It's just kind of purposeless sometimes. Whereas when they're at their best, it's drive, kick, you drive, you move, you cut. Everybody's in sync and in rhythm, and they look like a connected team that anyone can be the threat at any time. And sometimes that's because their opponent goes zone and they get thrown out of whack. Sometimes it's because they just are looking for a matchup they like and it takes them too long to get to it. Like it feels like when they have post mismatches, they look for it, they see it, and it takes them a couple too many passes. It's just not as connected or rim pressure-y as last year. So it doesn't feel like your turn, my turn. That's way too harsh of a way to put it, but it does feel like it's almost overpassing at times in a way where it's just like someone take initiative, go to the rim, and then try to get this defense to rotate.
Yeah. I'm telling you, they would not be good poker players because when they're not going well, they show it. And I mentioned this to you on the podcast they're going to release with us a little bit earlier today, that nobody shows the emotion on their sleeve out there when things certainly aren't going well than Miles. And I saw that in that bad Miami game on that Friday night. Then he ultimately apologized for it on that Sunday after a good game. And you could tell, you can just tell with this group when things aren't going right, especially for an extended period of time. And I know that comes with, if you're not playing well, especially offensively, those are things that are just going to happen. But it seems like that it takes these guys a little bit longer than average to get over it.
I agree. And it's funny you mentioned Miles because, like, in the past in his career, I thought it was kind of obvious when he wasn't confident. Maybe not necessarily that his attitude was right or wrong, but just how he would fade on his jumpers, the amount of force that he would play with towards the rim or with his finishing. You could just tell, this is going to be a powerful Miles game or not, a more passive game. And that kind of went away as Halliburton became his point guard and he got more touches and better touches. But yeah. I agree. And he even said it earlier this season. He didn't like his attitude, and you could see it at times on the floor and passionate and really going for the win and all that. It's just fair to everyone to go, well, why don't you like that all the time? But he looks great, and he has a fourth quarter like he did last night. And I don't mean to pick on him, but it's just because you mentioned him. But like that's the whole team in a way, right? You take on the attitudes of your leaders. So everybody can end up being like that and getting frustrated when there's a blown assignment behind them, or getting mad when a touch doesn't go their way or a pass doesn't see them the way they hope it does. And I get why players are like that. This is their job, and this is how they make their livelihood. They want it to go perfect. But when you're a team that's 8-10 and everybody's kind of a little underwater compared to last year, like you got to find a way to be better, and it requires having the right attitude for 48 minutes.
I thought last year was different for him because high ball action, he knew over half of the time Halliburton was going to break down whatever he did coming off that screen, and he was probably going to see the ball. And it's been a lot fewer opportunities for him with that in mind, either the way that defenses are playing that little two-man action they have, or because Halliburton's been unable to turn the corner. Whatever the case, that That is one aspect offensively I would love to see them get back to. That was a part of this team and what I felt was them flourishing a year ago when not only you had that working, but when Halliburton was orchestrating, from the top of the key, whether it's in two-man action or whatever, when he was breaking down the defense, it just makes everybody more comfortable and then everybody offensively more productive and better.
Totally. It was like one of the most efficient two-man partnerships in the league last year, and they could get to it all the time. That's why Turner had one of his most efficient seasons and one of his best scoring seasons, and they liked to pair those two. But even beyond that, like when it was totally clicking or looking great, as it did at times last year, like just the gravity of like, oh crap, Miles Turner's rolling and Halliburton turned the corner, like would force defenses to panic, and that opens up shots for anyone else, Neesmith, Nembhard, whoever. And that even that hasn't been the same, but it was just the breakup of how that has looked this year. So it's certainly different and probably will look different until they get some rhythm back or Halliburton can suck in the defense with his kind of gravity, which we've seen a little more of late as they've kind of looked at least a little more like themselves as a starting five. So some growth to do, and that was a big part of it last year. Siakam's presence has changed it. He set some screens now too, obviously, right? But it hasn't felt the same in a way that has held them back from being the second best offense of all time last season.
Obviously, until the middle of this month, taking advantage of the schedule that is before them, much like we knew the start of the season was going to be difficult, this is one that without question you have to take advantage of. What more are you looking forward to seeing, hopefully in the positive, for this team?
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, it's weird because I think the hope was that you just very obviously noticed them playing better, and they have only kind of done that. I think for them, they'll say, well, the results are the important part. They need the wins because they were 6-10. But just, two things stand out to me. Connected play from the starting five where they just look, even with Quentin Jackson out there, they just look good and like a group that can keep winning even when they play better competition. And at times that looked great. Like last night, they jumped out 27-12. The starters look good. That group closed strong. They've been mixing McConnell in with that group with good success. I think that's a big deal. But I bring up McConnell, too, to say, last year, their bench was awesome, right? Best in the league in scoring. There were so many games in March last year where the bench would start the fourth quarter out there against other team starters, and they would win those minutes, and then they would win the game because that was a huge advantage for them. Their bench hasn't been nearly as good last year. Toppin's three's not falling as much. McConnell's just been a little less efficient. Obviously, missing a ton of guys and has changed the roles of that group, but it hasn't looked or felt the same in a way that's been really critical for them because that changed a ton of games for them, and it carried them when Halliburton was in his slump. Their bench was so good it didn't matter as much. Now that they're playing some worse teams, I would like to see that bench connectivity, pace, scoring return from last year. I think that could go a long way for them and helping them on nights that their stars don't have it, which that hasn't helped as much.
Yeah, and they have to be healthy to do that too, because that's had certainly an impact with the injuries, and the bench is just not the bench in terms of what we had witnessed a year ago. All right, so when are you going to pop that podcast for us on Locked On Pacers?
It'll be posted at 12:01 a.m. specifically, so don't you worry.
All right, 12:01 a.m., and maybe we'll see Tony coming up tomorrow, right? At Brothers and Broad Ripple on your way down.
That's right.
Yeah, just have a couple of pops and then go down there and ask Rick a couple of questions.
That's right. Good deal.
Hey, by the way, do you like the sirs thing? The yes sirs?
Nah.
Do you hate it as much as I hate it? Because I hate it.
Well, I don't particularly like the just shortening Pacers to sir, but turning sirs into yes sirs is kind of cool, I suppose, so I'm kind of torn because I do shorthand a bunch of players' names all the time. I say Ijax when I'm talking about Isaiah Jackson and stuff, so who am I to judge people saying sirs? But, yeah, it's all right. It's okay.
I absolutely hate it. I think that's one of the reasons why they've been off to a bad start.
Do you say no, sirs, like a lot of people do when they're playing bad now?
Yeah. No, sirs. See, I just think that's the reason why they're off to a bad start. I think if they would shelve the whole sirs thing, I think all of a sudden they're going to be more like what we expected. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Appreciate you, man. And, we'll get that podcast out there. Let me know when it hits, and maybe we'll see you tomorrow.
You got it. You have a good holiday.
It's Tony East right there on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Locked On Pacers and so much more. You can find his work and a podcast on Locked On Pacers with Tony, with me, coming up with a little bit more in-depth of our conversation right there. Brothers Broad Ripple coming up tomorrow. You guys agree with me on the sirs thing? Yeah, I know everybody likes to say, especially the younger generation, old man yelling at clouds. I don't think I'm old man yelling at clouds. It just sounds stupid. I think it always has. You know, the first person, James, that I ever heard, and I know what happened before him, use the term sirs? Matt Taylor.
Really?
Matt Taylor. When he was my producer, he called them the sirs. Oh, God.
We should send the Pacers a letter and try and get some residuals from that marketing.
The sirs. So I'm assuming it's a younger generational thing, but man, I think it's brutal. Sirs. We could do away with it tomorrow and make me very happy, and I think this team would take off at that point in time. Quick break, we'll come back. You and I, coming up next at 239-1070. Rest of the way, top of the hour, the Colts Daily Update. Matt and I will talk a little Colts with you as well. Coming up here at the top of the hour, on the road tomorrow, that and more coming up. Stay right there. The AAA Membership Lounge. Become a member today and watch inside that AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live at 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
JMV.
The sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
James going for the 80s hits right here. The 1981 classic from the Human League, Don't You Want Me? Top of the hour, Colts daily update. 72-69, number 2, UConn and Colorado. Ted Boyle's a good coach for Colorado. Really good coach. 3-point advantage. And, yeah. That was almost disaster the UConn kind of saved. They look a little bit discombobulated, but a great move right there. Up 3 right now over Colorado with about a minute and a half remaining. Lots of college basketball for you. Yeah, thank you, Zach. Oh, no, it's everywhere. Yes, sir, is on the old billboard right there. Somebody had sent me, is it just basically bad traffic-wise everywhere? And I know that that's a daily occurrence. And we're not stopping the presses or anything, but it looks like everywhere you go around here, it's messed up. To me, at least. JMV, I hate sirs. I hate AR. I hate JT. How about JMV? Give respect addressing their whole names. John Michael Vincent. We never said PM for Peyton Manning. Why did this change? Yeah, my problem just is notoriously with the sirs. I never liked that. That is just me, however. JMV, I completely agree as far as players for UConn on the floor and their antics to the officials like their head coach. It's one thing if he does it and then if it transfers to them. And, yeah, if you watch them play, it absolutely can and does to this point. Yeah, college I love the rest of this week and going into this weekend in college basketball. I do. It is a fun time. IU Louisville coming up tomorrow, by the way. That is a noon start. That means that at 11 a.m., Don Fisher will not have your coverage. Somebody else doing IU basketball. I forget who it is. It's not Jeremy Renner. He's an actor. But somebody else is with Eric Soar down in the Bahamas to do that. That first-round matchup, that's a matchup with Louisville and Pat Kelsey, who also has been known to go a little bit crazy at times, too. That's coming up tomorrow. Again, that tip time is at noon from the Bahamas. And Colorado's fighting this bad boy out. Down 1 with 20 seconds to go over UConn. And then the head coach of UConn's about to go crazy, and the assistant coach is holding him back. I mean, damn. It's every minute. These guys, at some point, these officials are just going to tee you up whenever you say anything. Now, the whole being held back by your assistants is pretty funny. Happens more times than not right now. All right, 239-1070. Let's go to Bill. Hello, Bill. How are you?
JMV, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, Bill. What's up?
Hey, man, look forward to seeing you tomorrow at Brothers. The only thing that will keep me from there is if I'm in a mile-long line at Kroger trying to get the rest of the groceries for Thanksgiving. But I'm certainly planning on being there because that's kind of a tradition. But I want to talk about the IU-Purdue game. I saw today where IU was a 28.5-point favorite.
Yes.
I didn't know if that was a misprint or not, but the first IU-Purdue game I ever saw was in 1967 when IU went off to the Rose Bowl, and there was a player that stood out for IU that was fairly pedestrian the whole year. Of course, IU's big trio was Harry Gonzo, John Eisenberger, and Jade Butcher. But there's a guy named Terry Cole that rushed for like 150 yards against Purdue. And
his son's a big-time listener. Son's a big-time listener to the show, too.
Is he? Well,
yeah.
His dad.
I believe his son's name's Ben, I believe. I haven't talked to him in a while, but yeah.
But there'll be a player that'll really stand out, and you just after all the games I've seen IU and Purdue play, even though Purdue is that big underdog, you just can't sleep on them. And they're going to be competitive. It's not going to be a 28.5-point game. I mean, I hope it is.
It is, and you're legit. It is right now 28.5. How many people would lay the 28.5 to take IU there? That's a big old fat number, even with Purdue being an absolute disaster.
That is a huge number. So we'll see what happens. And I'm not counting the Colts out for the rest of the year because Houston ends up with Kansas City and Baltimore, and those two teams have something to play for. So it's not going to be resting starters or anything like that. But got to get by Denver and then take care of business. So,
well, I mean, this weekend, this is going to be more difficult than people think. Well, first of all, it's the Colts, and anything's going to be difficult to navigate. But this is going to be even made more difficult if you don't have Josh Downs, and obviously the situation at center, if it ends up being Danny Pinter, because, Ryan Kelly and Tanner Bortolini's in concussion protocol right now. So you've got even more, and we'll see what happens later on this week, but more injury situations that could end up playing a role. You can't, if you're the Colts, certainly Colts fans can't take anything for granted because they're right there with all these other teams we're talking about that should be so easily beaten.
Exactly, and of course that Denver game is going to be absolutely huge. And as far as the Pacers being called the Sirs, that reminds me of that old Mark Patrick line that you guys used to use as a sounder. Sir, I got to go.
You got that right. Jamison Brewer, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow, Bill. Thank you. Jamison Brewer is the guy that authored that. I want to say back around 0203, somewhere in that neighborhood. Remember former Pacer guard Jamison Brewer with Mark. I just saw Mark was active on social media a couple of days ago. So it has been a minute right there, no doubt about that. But interesting to say the least. Yeah, tomorrow we're going to be at Brothers in Broad Ripple. I'd mentioned this a little bit earlier, too, for Boilermaker fans. Would you rather the Boilermakers challenge and or upset IU or get blown out and then give more reason, more ammunition to let go of a head coach after 2 years? A head coach that right now, according to Golden Black Illustrated, is trending on getting a third year. For a Boilermaker fan, what more or what would you rather see happen of those two things? Just out of curiosity. UConn just upset by Colorado. I think Ted Boyle is a high-level quality college coach. So UConn and Maui, the two-time, now defending national champions, have lost two straight in overtime yesterday to Memphis, and now 73-72. UConn's 4-2 after losing to the Buffaloes of Colorado right there. Quick break. We shall return. Final time. Top of the hour. We'll get you set. Matt and I talked a little bit of Colts with you on the Colts Daily Update. And I'm going to head down to Roncalli and watch a little Cinegrove and Roncalli for you coming up, too. I know around the area and around the state, you got a lot of girls high school basketball going on, a lot of boys high school basketball going on. No doubt about that. Finals coming up in football Friday and Saturday. So this is a hell of a time of year. And how you can join us, just take a load off tomorrow and join us in Broad Ripple. I shall explain. We'll come back for a final time with his show and get ready for the Colts Daily Update at the top of the hour with Matt Taylor. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
And the beat goes on, yeah. And the beat goes on.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
James over there, I'm John. Tomorrow, Brothers in Broad Ripple. That's a Bud Light Blue Wednesday. A tradition on what the young kids call a Blackout Wednesday, what we used to call it High School Hookup Wednesday. That is the night before Thanksgiving in Broad Ripple at Brothers tomorrow. Would love to see you. A very prominent vice president of this area chimes in with this. JMV, I would take Go Sirs a lot better than Yell, Scream, and Go Horse for the Colts. It's from Nick. There's one. See if you can find it up here, James, if you got a minute. Pacer Pride. You guys remember the 80s Pacer Pride? Pacer Pride was a jingle. Pacer Pride, the heart of Indiana. It's Pacer Pride. Now, I wasn't a fan of that. I'd rather have that 1,000 times more. Pacer Pride, the heart of Indiana. It's Pacer Pride. BT says, sirs, for the shoe, it all sucks. Started by people trying to be cool and come across ignorant. Now, I didn't go that heavy. I think it's nerdy. Trying to be cool, but ignorant. You're not no account, Ernest T. You're just ignorant. You're just being nice. Great line. Yeah, Skivvies says, the pride of Indiana. Yeah, Skivvies remembers that. That was a jingle. James, if you come up with it, let me know. That's going to be very impressive if you do in the time that we have remaining. Very, very impressive. Thank you very much. That is exceptionally good stuff. Yeah, I mentioned, too, IU tomorrow. IU basketball tomorrow, obviously. That tips at noon, 93 WIBC, 11 a.m. Your coverage begins over there. And Bill was right when he called up. That's 28.5-point favorite IU over Purdue in the bucket game. I have a couple of places to go for the bucket game, a little pregame party down there, a little tailgate. So let me know if you're having one. I may try to drop in. Because it does, as it normally does, sound like a great time down there coming up this weekend. Just an exceptionally great time, does it not? Man, a lot of good games coming up later on this evening. Actually, in Maui, you get Michigan State and Memphis about ready to get underway right after the top of the hour. And then a lot more coming up later on tonight. The Hillbillies dig on this, the Hilltoppers of Western Kentucky, and number 8 Kentucky tonight. Number 1 Kansas, number 11 Duke. Hunter Dickinson has played college basketball for the better part of 39 years. He'll be 40 coming up in March. Number 4 Auburn, number 12 North Carolina. How about that? Auburn will... They may fight one another, but they will wear you out, hoops-wise. JMV, do you have a ticket for the bucket? I may have one. Uh-oh. I may end up going. What's the temperature going to be? It's going to be, not that matters. Well, yeah, it kind of does. See, here's the other reason why I bring this up. We're doing, and somebody had told me yesterday, I think Gigi was the one that brought this up yesterday, where I am on Sunday, something called Chris Kringle something up in Carmel, where they have like an ice rink and stuff. I can't remember what it was now, but he brought it up.
You're asking for the temperature for Saturday?
Yes.
My phone says high of 32.
32? That's a high?
That's the high, according to my phone.
All right, well, now, because I know I've got to do this on Sunday, Colts pregame huddles live in Carmel outside at 10 a.m. on Sunday. Can you look at Sunday? What is the 10 a.m. forecast read for Sunday and Caramel by the Sea? Right there. And that's me, and I don't know if Wrights, there's no way Wrights is going to show up for that.
I don't know what it will be at 10 a.m., but the high for the day is 28.
28. Who scheduled that, Gorman? Gah. It's going to be outside. I hear that place is fun as hell, though. Got an ice skating rink and other stuff going on. They are having, I guess, what is an outdoor watch party for it. So the high is 28 on Sunday, huh?
They may have, like, space heaters or something out there for you.
I sure as hell better have space heaters out there for us. I'm cold-natured. Be lucky if I wear a shirt. Hey, JMV, go heels, and Bruce Pearl looks like Lou Ferrigno. Probably not in the good way. Not like the Lou Ferrigno of 1979 either, right? So I get what you're saying, Frank. Hey, great show today. You guys have been fantastic. Greg Rakestraw earlier. Talked a lot of college stuff, high school stuff with Greg. And Nate Atkins of the Star, Colts situations, and if the accountability across the board's being met. And then Tony East. The podcast with Tony and I will be alongside you. Coming up later on this evening, too, talking Pacers. Hey, we'll talk up the college football playoff projection where right now it's predicted IU as an 11. We'll see if that holds true. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Brothers in Broad Ripple, Bud Light Blue Wednesday. All of us will be there and you tomorrow at 3.